Thank you for coming, everyone. So my name is Keyvan. I'm going to talk about PHP, HTML, and specifically the kind of focus a little bit is going to be the new DOM features in PHP 8.4. So I don't know if anyone has used it yet, or if maybe it's actually good to check. Does anyone use HTML with PHP or with any other language, parsing HTML? Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So not too many newcomers to it then. But yeah, this is going to look at a little bit at what changed with PHP 8.4 and why I'm excited about it. This is the outline for the talk. There's going to be a brief intro, why people parse HTML. We're going to look at the new DOM API, CSS selectors, XPath selectors, and then I'll try and demo some of the things that I've done with HTML parsing, some of the things I've worked on, and we can look at some code and how it kind of works. Okay, so a little about me. I studied in the UK, computing, and then I studied interaction design in Sweden. I've worked with PHP for many years. I live in Sweden now, and I've started this company, Mochi Digital, with a friend of mine. And the two kind of products we're working on now, one's called Feed Control, which is creating and filtering and monitoring feeds, basically. You can create feeds from a website or use an existing one and then make changes to it. We have publishers who publish their content onto news platforms like MSN, where they need a specific kind of feed. But we also have users who just need to produce feeds for various other reasons. And then Push to Kindle is an old project of mine, which is basically turning web pages, web articles, basically, into ebooks to deliver to the Kindle. So it's, if anyone's familiar with like the read modes on browsers, it's kind of, the first step is that. It's basically analyzes an HTML page, figures out, okay, this is the content, and then extracts that and then turns that into an ebook. So the core part of it is that conversion from HTML into an EPUB, which itself is HTML, but just with content. And then there's the open source readability PHP, which I started one version. This is a newer one based on Mozilla's work, and it was maintained by someone else, and I took over maintenance of it a couple of years ago. So that's something I'm still working on. That's one of the things actually that I'm trying to update now with the new PHP 8.4 changes. So okay, some reasons why. Is this actually moving? Yeah. Okay. I think I was looking at the wrong thing. So some reasons people parse: extracting data to save to a database. If you have, I don't know, a lot of people have product listings. If you have like an online site, if there's no API, that's a common way. You just get it straight from the HTML, whatever you need. Manipulating content. If you need to insert elements, change them. Sanitize for untrusted content. If you ever have like submission forms where someone can leave a comment, often you have to clean that up before you can publish it for preventing XSS and various other things. Converting to different formats. We have one project where we do sort of a printable PDF of web articles where we convert articles into PDFs, PDF newspapers kind of. And there's also for testing, if you do any kind of web testing, often there's like selectors where you have to sort of check if an element contains a certain thing that ought to be in there, and if it's not, it gets flagged as a failure. So I'm going to look at a little bit about what, if I remember this right, a little bit about what the HTML parsing looks like today, but also what's been the common way of parsing. So you have libxml, which is it's an old C-based fast parser, and if you use like DOM document in PHP where you parse some HTML, that's what's being used. But it was started in 1999. It's based on HTML4 standard, which is quite old, and they've added some kind of support for various HTML5 elements, but it's at the moment, there's many valid HTML documents that it just won't be able to, it'll mess it up quite badly. So people who need to rely on, especially parsing untrusted content, if it's not your own HTML from maybe something you've produced, but anything on the web, anything someone else sends you, you can't rely on it really for HTML. But it's available pretty much on every PHP installation. There's HTML5 PHP. Is anyone here familiar with that or used it? Okay. It's also used a lot in some, if you use some Symfony components that do DOM or other things, many of those will be using this as a dependency. So it's a HTML parser written in PHP, but it is based on the W3C standard, which is, when it started in 2013, that standard was, up to 2013, and now it's a little bit outdated, and it's hard to know how much these kind of projects keep up with the current standards. But that one's available via Composer, so you would, and it's a bit slower because it's not C-based like the others. And Lexplore is the latest one basically that's been introduced in PHP 8.4. Has anyone heard of Lexplore before? Okay. Nice. I'd never heard of this when it was released, so I was very curious when it came out. But that's another fast C-based parser. Speed-wise, it's kind of similar to libxml. It was started in 2018 based on the newer WG standard, which is now the current body that maintains the HTML standard. And it's pretty much available and enabled on most installations since PHP 8.4. So there's no dependency or packet, anything like that. It's built in. So I'm going to sort of show you some HTML documents here, and we're going to get to some that are problematic for the current parser. That's the previous one, I should say. I did a blog post about this, some of these changes, and I posted up a small HTML snippet, and I realized that because the standard updates so much, and there's so many things that are in the spec that people aren't aware of. Often people who have a lot of experience with HTML, they're still surprised to see what today is still seen and treated as valid HTML. Not just HTML that a browser will render and display to you, but actually validate. These are all valid HTML files that won't cause any errors. So you can see this one, there's no HTML, there's no head, there's no body, there's no closing p tags. That's all valid. Here you'll see there's unescaped angle bracket in attributes. That's valid HTML. That would cause you problems before. So these are the kind of things that parsers have to be able to parse. And this is a small snippet that I posted sorry, on my blog to highlight basically the problem with parsing HTML with PHP up to now, basically. And I should say it's not just a PHP problem. If you use most programming languages that depend on libxml, they have the same problem. It's not the language's fault, it's just the parser's a bit outdated. So we have HTML document, 2 paragraphs, and a script element in there. So this is how you would do it before. You would say new DOM document, load HTML, and the HTML variable there has this HTML at the top that you can see. And we just do a simple, get the elements, get the p elements. And then we say, how many did you find? And with a new parser, you can see we have fewer lines because you no longer have to create an instance of DOM document. You just go straight HTML document, create from string. And they've kind of split this one into HTML document, XML document. I'm not going to talk about XML document, but XML document is basically what you're used to with DOM document. But the rest of it is the same. So we just get elements by tag name p. So a lot of people are surprised to see that with the old parser, if you run this today, even in PHP 8.4, because this will still run, it'll still use libxml for backward compatibility. It finds 3 paragraphs, and the new parser finds 2. And we're going to look a little bit at what goes on there. So the problem is, as you can see here, we've got this. So we've serialized it back to HTML, and it should look like, or close to it, the source HTML. We should have one document with 2 paragraphs, a script tag, script element, title element. But instead, we've got, let's have a look. We've got 3 paragraphs. And you can see at the bottom, a whole new HTML section has been created. So what that HTML tag that you see that should be treated as text content is tripping up the libxml parser, because that at some point that was not valid XHTML, and it just there's a lot of and this is a simple example, but people ran into these kind of issues where they were passing huge 500 kilobyte, 1 megabyte HTML pages from these big sites, and they would just see random JavaScript all over the content, and they'd be very confused, like, what is going on? How did the JavaScript get into my content? And this is kind of the reason. There's things that trip up the parser. And you can see with the new parser, we serialize it back, it looks much more reasonable. There's some of the parts that we'd skipped out with the head and body, which aren't required, they've been put back in, but it's essentially what we had in the beginning. Okay, so that's one side of it. There's a new parser in PHP 8.4, and to use it, you have to kind of use that where was it? This one on the right, the new parser. You have to use DOM HTML document create from string. Then you're using the new DOM API. You can still do what's on the left, and you'll get the same results as you did before. Because there's so much code relying on that, they didn't want to change it for everyone. It's kind of opt-in. You have to, if you have code, you have to say, okay, now I'm going to use the new one to benefit from the new parser. So these are some of the benefits with the new DOM API. You have fewer lines to begin with. You don't have to do the new DOM document and then DOM load HTML. You also have these helper properties, head, body, title. And many of these changes are actually, there's a DOM standard. So these aren't just the PHP guys thinking this will be convenient. There's a standard that they're adhering to. And there's inner HTML. So if anyone's used that in JavaScript, that's now there. We'll look at some examples too. And the biggest one for me is CSS selector support. So we have query selector now, we have query selector all, and quite comprehensive CSS support for those selectors. So you can do, we'll see some examples, but you can do quite powerful queries now with, without relying on CSS to XPath, or if anyone's used Symfony's CSS selector, that's no longer necessary. So the new API, the new DOM classes are under this DOM namespace. So DOM document is now DOM HTML document, and then we have these others. And so that's how, so usually you would see those 2 lines to start off, where you would either give it an HTML string or you'd give it a file. And this is the new way on the right is how you would do that. And then the difference here is with the right-hand side, you'd get back a class. You'd be triggering the new parser, Lexpor, not libxml, and you'll get back the new DOM HTML document. Whereas on the left, you can still run the left, and you'll get back the old. You'll be using libxml, and you'll be getting back DOM document as you did before. So those properties I talked about, body. So you can do this. You can just reference the body element directly. You can change the title of a document just by assigning the new title. And you can reference the head element. So those are just convenience properties that make life easier. Then we've got inner HTML. So instead of working with DOM elements, and which can be you can write quite a lot just to do basic things, you can now just give it some HTML and it will do all that internally for you. So you can see here we've got a DOM object, and we're changing it just by changing the inner HTML of some inner child of that DOM object. Okay, CSS selectors. So we have query selector, which basically returns the first matching element of whatever you give it. And we've got query selector all, which returns a node list. So this is, if anyone's done JavaScript with this stuff, it's kind of the same idea. You have, so here we're getting query selector all P, and you get paragraph. So this is essentially the same as get elements by tag name, if you just do that. But the P now can be any kind of CSS expression. So you can do this. You can do this kind of stuff. So give me all the P's that are direct children of the article, all the H1s, all the H2s. You can use this kind of more modern sort of CSS pseudo classes and things like that, where you can do. So the line at the bottom there is equivalent to the top. You're just saying anything that's a P or an H1 or H2 that's a direct child of article, return that to me. You can do things like give me all the paragraphs in an article that have at least an A element in there. Anything, yeah, H1 has an H2 that immediately follows it. So you're getting like pretty powerful stuff. Anything attributes starting with contains case insensitive matching of attributes. And some of these things are actually hard to do in XPath. If anyone's had XPath experience, if you want to, with XPath 1, the case sensitivity thing is a pain. But we've now got that in with these. So there's, has anyone had XPath experience here? Okay, quite a few, all right. Nice. I feel like with, there's people who've had a lot of experience with XML, XPath, going back a long time, and then there are like newer developers who don't tend to work with that as much, but they're more in the front-end world, CSS selectors, and CSS is in this weird place now where the spec is kind of, some of you might know more, but I think it feels like it's guided more by the presentation side, but also used heavily, basically for what XPath was used for. And then there are things that I think it could quite easily manage, but for whatever reason, they're choosing not to include in the spec. So we're going to look at two of those here. So you can see that these are the CS. So this is the thing you see on the left now of what you can do in PHP 8.4. And then the XPath equivalent of those selectors you see on the right. And for me, the most surprising one is always a simple class selector. That is the equivalent. You can see that very long line is kind of crazy. But then we have these at the bottom, those two, where if you want to select, not based on the node name, not based on the attribute, but the actual content of the element, you can't do that with CSS. And they've kind of toyed with the idea of having contains and other things. And from what I understand, for performance reasons, and I guess performance on the front end, they've chosen not to implement it. So we don't have that in CSS. So you still kind of, either you do it with code, or if you want to do it as a selector, XPath still comes in handy here. So here we're saying on the right, if anyone's unfamiliar with it, we're saying get all the P elements that in their text, so in the actual paragraph text, has written by somewhere in there. We could also do starts with or various other things. And then the other thing we have at the bottom is the attribute selector. So we can, with XPath, we can actually say, give me all the attribute nodes, not just the element, which we can't do with CSS. And I assume because no one's styling attributes with CSS, so there's no feature there for it. Okay, I'm going to switch, I think, now to showing you some of this in action and how I use it and what kind of things we've done with it. I hope I can actually get this right. Oh, wow, it's so bright. Huh. Maybe I can do this if I go localhost. Oh no, I can't actually see the top. All right, this is something I prepared. I hope it works, but I think the first thing I should do is get rid of the I think almost done. I'm just trying to, or actually, maybe you can have. I'm just trying to. Maybe it's better to switch it now, so it's just a mirror. Otherwise, I'm going to get lost trying to find everything.
Then we go to
Oh, sorry. Is it back in here?
display, and then
Just duplicate. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. This is, if anyone uses a cursor, I love it for these kind of things. You can just quickly get it to update. Oh, there we go. So I've got some examples here. We've got, let me actually just go back here. So we've got a simple GET request, and then we're using, we're passing it, sorry, we're passing it with the new HTML parser, and then we're going to look at using a headless request. Has anyone worked with headless browser requests? Okay, so great, okay. We're going to look at HTML sanitization. Anyone experienced with that? Okay, great. Readability, so this is a project that I maintain now, which is mostly for that blog post news articles. I'll show you an example of that, and then we'll use it. We'll do a quick sort of demo on one of the, on the PHP conference website. So the first one, if we go to simple get, is that visible, or do I need to do, or maybe the resolution is now terrible. Can I? It was there?
Yes, and then.
What do I change? It's already.
Yes, and then.
Oh, this one?
The one below. Yeah.
This one?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You can tell I haven't presented here before. So this is a very basic example where we're fetching this, test with JavaScript, and we're using the new create from string, get all the paragraphs, and then echoing found how many paragraphs. And the file you see here, so this is the demo I wanted to show, is we've got 4 paragraphs and then 2 more that we're adding with JavaScript. So in the and I show this because with modern websites now, many people who do parsing, they do it with real content that's on the web, and so much of that now is that loaded with JavaScript in one way or another. I mean, I've seen news sites where they just have essentially paragraphs of text loaded with JavaScript. So many people who try and get those, the problem they have is they go on the website. Let's use bbc.com as an example. Oh God, and then and then you go look at the source. When you do the inspector view, you're seeing everything, the HTML, after JavaScript has been executed. So this is not necessarily what the server has sent. And when you're requesting content from PHP, you're getting essentially what the server sent without any JavaScript. So this is going to demo 2 ways of getting this content. One which I'll run now, the simple get. So here we're passing this file, and we're going to count the paragraphs. And we can see it says I have found 4 paragraphs. And if we look at it, we can see, yeah, there's 4 paragraphs. If we go into the if we go into simple JS.html, test with JS.html. But you can see when I go in the inspector view, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I tell here, find me all the P elements in the body, I get 1 of 6. PHP, we get 4. And you can actually see, if anyone uses developer tools, I use Firefox, if you go F1, you can go disable JavaScript, and now you see we have 4 elements. And if we see here, we now have 4 elements, the same as here. So one way to get past that is there's lots of like web services that do headless browsing. You can there's a lot of options, but you're essentially having to run a full browser to run this and then give you the HTML back. And one easy way if you want to test yourself is with Chrome testing, which is this one I have here, headless request. So you can see now it's found 6 paragraphs. And if we look at the code for that, it is very short, but it's essentially now passing that URL to Chrome headless dump DOM, and you give it the URL, and it just returns the DOM to standard out, and you can grab it, give it to the parser. So there it executes the JavaScript. So that's a kind of useful thing to use. I guess for a larger scale project, you would use a service for it. But the other thing I wanted to show here was HTML sanitization. So if we go back here, if we look at this one with the headless request, so we've actually outputted so we've serialized this back. We've grabbed it, we've passed it, and this is the serialization after that. And you'll notice that we've got the script tag. So imagine you were going to publish this on your website or in a database. You don't necessarily want this script tag on some random site, and especially as it can have, might pop up something, run something you don't want. So this is the Symfony has an HTML sanitizer library, which is useful for this kind of thing. So you can see it's essentially the same code as before, except we're importing Symfony's sanitizer, and we're sanitizing the HTML. And then when we output it, it's removed that script tag. And it will check for other things as well and attributes. But this is kind of for a long time people used HTML Purifier, I think. Is anyone familiar with that? So that also does this, but it's a much older, heavier. It does a lot more. Whereas this Symfony's HTML sanitizer is kind of focused just on this task, and there's a spec as well, a standard for sanitization too now. So this is trying to adhere to that standard, which is always great. So it should be producing results somewhat similar to other sanitization libraries you might use with JavaScript or other languages. So this is particularly useful if anything that you're passing in HTML you want to actually publish again for others to view on your website or somewhere. Let's look at another example here. So readability processing. So I'll show you this one. So this is the project that I maintain. Readability. Is anyone familiar with readability? So readability is it passes HTML, but its goal is for news articles, blog posts, anything where you've got a lot of content. And it's particularly useful now with LLMs because a lot of people. Like say if you tell ChatGPT, one of these systems, summarize this article for me, or tell me the main points, before they can summarize, they need to actually get the article, the content, the heading, the title, the paragraphs. And what they're actually presented with, I'll show you an example when they get it, is, so this is what I just pulled in today from Reuters. So this is like 500 kilobytes, and I'll just load it here so you can see. So this is this article. You can see it's essentially just a title, an image, some paragraphs, some bullet points, and that's it. And then you've got all this stuff. But if you view the source, it looks small here, but it's actually because it's a huge one-line thing. I've formatted it here so you can see. So this is the source of that article. The actual content is tiny. So what is this like? And what readability does is you give it all of that and you say, find me the article. And it says, here you go. We'll try it. So we go readability processing, and I'll show you the code for this. So first of all, this is what readability returns to you. It says, from that HTML we just looked at, it returns this. So this is the bullet points here. There is a way to print out the heading. I didn't do that. So this is just the body. And then you've got the paragraphs, London, blah, 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 blah. And it ends around the bottom here. So you can see it gives you some stats here. So the original HTML that I gave it was 527 kilobytes. It extracted, the content it extracted was 18 kilobytes out of that. And then we sanitized it, which cleaned it up. And so we got it down to 16 kilobytes, which is this what you see here. And so I'll just show you the code for this here. So we have readability. So the HTML, the Symfony sanitizer we had before, and now we're adding readability to it. For this one, we don't actually need to do the Chrome headless thing. I think I just left that in there. It can rewrite relative URLs, and you give it the configuration, and you call this parse. So that's the main thing. So that basically goes through all the elements and tries to score everything with this idea of some heuristics about what is likely to be content to be kept. And then it runs through it a few times, and eventually it's like, okay, keep only the things with the highest score, and that tends to be the content, if it's blog, if it's news. And this is what powers Mozilla Firefox's reader mode. If you're on any site and you go, just give me the text, it's the same thing. So this is a port of the JavaScript version. And so that I would say that's useful if you're ever working with HTML and you want to work with news content, blog posts, articles, things like that. I'll show another example of the. Well, let's see if we go to the Dutch PHP speakers conference thing. So I did one example here where. Just load that and show you. So here I've given it the URL to that page that I just loaded, this one. And what I did was I want to just print out all the names in a plain text list and the company next to it. So we just use a simple file get contents, which does a basic HTTP request. We use the new parser, and we use the new CSS selector class. So we say, and the way I found that is if in developer tools, inspect mode, you have this in Chrome, in Firefox, you can basically go through, click on an element, say I want to inspect this, I want to inspect. So if you know, you can kind of point it to, I want to extract that name. So you can see we've got a div class, speaker name, h4. Above it, we've got, I think there was something else I missed, but I think it was this one, but anyway, I'll figure that out. But you can say, get all the speakers, speaker name, so that picks out all of these elements. And then we just loop through them. First we say how many did it find, we loop through them, and for each one we say, get me the h4 element and the text content. And then the company, we say, and for the company I can show you, it's like speaker bio, and then we have this B. And they're pretty much all formatted the same. So we go dot speaker bio space B. So this is just a normal CSS selector you would use if you were styling that page. You say, give me that element and give me its text content, and then echo out. So if I run this, speaker extract, you get a list like this. Found 56 speakers, and just lists them out. So the new CSS selector, I think, is very useful and powerful for this kind of thing. Like with XPath, you would write a lot more. And this is, especially if you're familiar with front-end CSS, it's pretty useful. Maybe I'll show one more. Is it 10 more minutes left? Yes, okay, great. I'll show one more thing. And then we can take some questions. Where did I want to go? Okay, one of the things I was going to show was with the product that we have that uses selectors, just to give you an example of some of the things that you can do. So this is a product I work on with Matthias, the co-founder, and we have this web page to RSS feature. So you can come here and you can give it, and maybe I'll use this news thing as an example. I mean, this actually has, I checked earlier, they have an RSS feed for this page, but let's put that in here, and we say, let's use advanced selectors. And this is running PHP. So we say, we do the same thing, but what this does is it creates a feed, an RSS feed. So you can actually go to a page that doesn't have an RSS feed, and just using CSS selectors, HTML parsing, you can create your own feed. So here with this one, I can say, I want the news content as the item selector, and this is CSS, so I go preview, and it's picked out those, and then I say I want the news excerpt as the description, and it's picked that out, and you can kind of, it's got places for dates and other things. Actually, this one I think we need to narrow it down, so we can say H4. So we can say the title is in H4. And that's a little better. And another thing that, I don't know if anyone's, if you do work with selectors, one thing we introduced, which was kind of an experiment, was to, I haven't tested it on this, but I'll try it, but was to try with AI mode. So with this one, we grab the HTML, we parse it, we clean it up, and then we give it to the AI and say, try and find suitable selectors. Try and identify where a list of items is, come up with CSS selectors, and then fill this in for us. So this is what the AI returns. So obviously it used different selectors than I did, but that's okay. And it's tried to do the date, but hasn't quite worked. But that's also kind of a useful thing, I would say, to experiment with, is getting these like AI tools to generate selectors for you, whether it's CSS or XPath. Okay, I won't go back to the slide because that's going to be a mess. I'll wrap it up there. One thing I did want to say, if anyone's interested in this, I have a blog where, so most of this PHP thing, actually credit goes to Niels Dosch. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Please correct me if it's wrong. I think he's from Belgium. So I interviewed him. He's basically been responsible for introducing all these changes to PHP. He kind of did it by himself. It was his own thing. And so I interviewed him about it. So if you're curious about how this all came about, you can read that interview with him. I've also got a blog post where I go through some of the things that I've talked about, if you're curious. And yeah, I will leave it there.